Hey guys, we are here today to discuss Chapter 4 of Outwitting the Devil together. We're going to have a quick recap on all 3 chapters so far. So chapters 1 and 2 are really focused on teaching us how Hill learned who his higher self was through his many temporary defeats that he had to overcome. We also got to see Hill's patterns of unhappiness because he wasn't following his true calling. In Chapter 3, we learn about Hill's last temporary defeat and how it brought him to his true happiness, while also forcing the devil to confess in this interview-style book that you and I get to read. And I want to point out that in Chapter 3, the devil considers himself to be nothing more than the negative energy of our world. For more information on Chapters 1, 2, or 3, please go to the group topic tab, Outwitting the Devil group class. And if you're following me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, comment on whatever video you want. Check the description. There should also be a link to our Facebook group in there. Please feel free to send an invite. From where the interview starts in Chapter 3 until the end of the book, we are in a complete interview style. So it's going to be a game of questions and answers, if you will. Remember that Hill may change topics to keep the devil from using his words to confuse us, causing us to AKA drift. It may seem like we are all over the place, and I will do my best to keep things as comprehensible as possible. This is why it took me so many times to read this book. There's so much information to be gained from the book, but the devil definitely does not make it easy trying to understand his responses. I really encourage you all to be reading these chapters with me because there are things that I won't be talking about, but they are very interesting to learn. So right away in Chapter 4, we open up with some friction between Hill and the devil. The devil at this point in time doesn't want to confess anymore, but Hill has the ability to make him because he practiced talking and communicating with his higher self. So he's built up that mediumship skill, if you will. He's also using his clairaudience. So we soon find out that drifting is one way that the devil silently enters our minds. So what is a drifter then? A drifter is anyone who permits themselves to be influenced and controlled by the circumstances outside of their minds. Someone who would rather let people give them all the answers than looking for the answers themselves. Someone who accepts whatever life throws at them instead of fighting back and finding a way around it. Someone who has many opinions, but none of these opinions are formed from their own thoughts. And a person who is simply just too lazy to use their own brain is what Hill claimed as a drifter. So on pages 91 through 93, we get a more comprehensive list of what is a drifter. Lack of major purpose in life, a person with lack of self-confidence, someone who never acquires anything that requires thought and effort, someone who spends more money than they earn, someone who complains about being sick, whether this is a real illness or something they've completely made up in their own minds, someone with little to no imagination. There's at least 30 more things that are listed to describe a drifter, and I highly encourage you guys to go to those pages and check the list out for yourself. Now that we know what a drifter is, what makes a person a non-drifter? A non-drifter is someone who has a definite goal and they are always taking action working towards this goal. A non-drifter is a person who gives direct answers when asked a question. They do not beat around the bush. They are someone who seems to always be helping others but rarely ask for help themselves. A non-drifter will admit that they don't know the answer to a question instead of lying their way through it. A person who does not blame others is a non-drifter. Even if the problem could somewhat be the other person's fault, they still don't blame them. The biggest thing that makes a person a non-drifter is the fact that they have their own mind and they know how to use it. Again, there's a more comprehensive list found on pages 93 and 94 that I highly suggest you guys check out. After you've checked out those lists, which category do you fall into? How do you feel about what category you fall into? I'm highly curious to know. So we learn that the only difference between a drifter and a non-drifter is the ability to the ability to use the mind and think for ourselves. Neither one of us is born with an advantage over the other. We both must develop into beings who seek all answers for ourselves and form our own opinions. So I was totally a drifter up until last year. I had experienced numerous temporary defeats, some to which I found ways around, and others, they completely stopped me dead in my tracks. 5 years ago, prior to today, is when I really started on my mindset journey, but things didn't really start to click until this past year. I've learned how to take a step back from these temporary defeats to 1, find the lesson that needs to be learned, and to 2, see a way around this lesson. Sometimes it requires help, which is what Hill was talking about in chapter 3 when he talked about masterminds. Like everybody else, I have my own small group of masterminds who help me work through things when I can't see the truth on the other side myself. I'm so grateful for every single one of them because they have been such a benefit to my life in these past 5 years. I definitely wouldn't be here today without the help of Jen. She really was patient with me to help me understand the things that I kept asking questions about. So I'm really, really grateful for her. People like her are sent here to help us, believe it or not. And eventually we get to step into that role ourselves to be able to help others in our own unique way. This is the exact reason I am here doing this video with you guys, because I want to help you awaken your mind like I did by reading this book 5 years ago. So throughout this chapter, the devil makes it known that he receives his best results when he's able to capture our minds as children and influence drifting upon us at a young age. So there's 2 main ways which he goes about doing this. He manipulates our parents before they are born. Our parents are our biggest role models, right? So if he can use them as tools, we automatically get placed in his hands when we're born through the negative thinking and patterns that our parents have created, and we now become stuck in. Our parents, also place thoughts of religion, politics, marriage, and much more into our minds instead of allowing us to form our own thought patterns on these things. And instead of teaching us to fear things or not to fear things, we as parents, or for whatever reason, we as parents should be teaching our children to use their minds daily to think for themselves. So this means at the next science fair, don't do your children's homework for them. Encourage them to think outside of the box for themselves, but be there in case they need guidance. It's completely different than just doing the work for them. Excuse me. Let me take a drink real quick. Oops, it's light. Okay, it's okay. So, when I read this chapter, I was really happy because this is something that I do with my children already. As we know, our children come to us with this "I can't" attitude, and it's very critical that we get them out of that pattern of "I can't" so that they can develop into "I can." It just might take 3 or 4 steps to figure out what I'm trying to do. My 2 and 3-year-old are really good with this because they're with me more often. However, my 8-year-old, who lives with her dad in Bismarck, struggles more. And so it's really evident when you have a parent whose cup is half full as opposed to when you have a parent whose cup is half empty. It makes a huge difference in the mindset of the child. So the devil also uses what he calls, or what we call, physical heredity. And this is literally what we inherit from our ancestors. There's so many things that we can inherit. When I think about inheriting things, I think about, cancer is one of them that tends to go through the inherited line, and just there's all kinds of temporary defeats that we inherit, if you think along the terms of that. And then we're also placed into environments that are used against us to push us into the most common habits of drifting. Fear is something that is used, and once our minds are captured through fear, we lose the ability to reason and think for ourselves. This state of being continues to grow with us, and the fear continues to evolve. So that fear continues to grow as we continue to grow. Superstition. Okay, sorry about that. Superstition is another thing that is used to form us into drifting. Avarice, extreme greed for wealth or material gain, and then of course greed, lust, revenge, anger, vanity, which is excessive pride, or is what I like to call the ego, and then we also have just pure laziness, which can make us become a drifter. Some other things that induce us into drifting is school. We go to school without an aim or a purpose. The teachers and leaders in the schools teach us these materials for 8 hours a day, but they never really teach us how to practically use this material out in the real world. We're also rarely taught to search for information ourselves. Instead, we're just given it and we're told to memorize it. And this is very evident for me when it comes to the counties and the presidents and the states and all that tedious stuff in history class. And then there's also rules that we have to obey. And when we step up in our own independence because we agree with or disagree with something, we're reprimanded for it. And this creates fear. So instead of standing up in the future, we simply just comply and shut down. We shut down. So they teach us the thoughts of others, and we're encouraged to implement them as our own. This can be recognized with every textbook that you read growing up in school. How to do math problems, how to write the English words, you name it, it's out there. Another trick is used against us is our religious instructors. I have only met one religious instructor who told me that the devil was nothing to fear. And it took me a long time to understand what this really meant. In my own words, he is nothing to fear because, just like he stated, he's just energy. And energy can be shifted. Thoughts can be rewritten, and his doings can be undone. The work isn't easy, but it's so rewarding because once you get to the end, you're no longer stuck in that victim, why is this happening to me energy anymore. There's also a lot of them out there who will tell you what to believe in and what not to believe in. The current pastor of our town has been a giant help for me, or was a giant help for me when I read this book for the first time. I even gave him this book to read, and he communicated back to me with an open mind and never looked down or frowned upon me because I did read the book. So when I asked him a question, he really did encourage me to read in between the lines and what did it mean for me instead of, well, this is what it means. So he never filled my head with words and said, no, there's only one way to do it. The pastors of my past, though, were not like this. They were so closed-minded that every time I asked them a question, they immediately shut down. So because of this, I had no interest in God. I had no interest in the church or anything about religion up until this past year, really. And so a lot of the people in our town really like our new pastor, but they really don't know how blessed they truly are. Habits themselves are another thing that can induce us into drifting. The devil goes on to tell us that habits are related. When I think about in terms of energy, like attracts like, that's how this resonates with me because like attracts like. So if we're stuck in a pattern, the pattern is going to continue to flow around us until we make the necessary changes to break that cycle. He says that if we're able to drift in one direction, we will soon be drifting in all directions. Now, Hill points out that these are supposed to be the people that we can trust, and it's not fair how manipulated we are, especially at such an early age. And the devil laughs in response to Hill, saying, this is exactly why I have control over 98% of the population. It literally blew my mind to learn all of the ways that we're manipulated as children. And it really helped me to realize that the devil has no sense of right or wrong, but only his ego exists. So in other words, he doesn't care what he has to do to get what he wants. At the end of the day, when all things seem to be going wrong, the devil instills yet another one of his clever tricks on us. He makes us look up into the sky and blame God for all of our misfortunes. This was a huge eye-opener for me because all of my life I have been asking God, why are you doing this? How could you do this? And the truth is, he wasn't doing it. It's us that do it because we're not making the necessary changes that we should be making to get to the point where we're supposed to be. We stay in our comfort zones, right? So also, unknown to me until this last year is we also inherit these lives. So we have to go through what we have to go through so that we can be here. Like, for example, so that I can be here in front of you guys right now as the person that I am going through these chapters with you guys. Because had I not experienced the crazy life that I've had to have, I probably wouldn't be here in front of you guys right now. So once we get out of this victim mentality, we're able to step out of the why is this happening to me and step into this what is this teaching me. Life gets better and it does seem easier. What serves our highest good will never bring us fear, just new lessons helping us grow into the best versions of ourselves, right? So more methods by which we become drifters are marriage. How many couples do you know out there who rushed into a relationship and rushed to get marriage? They don't have that 50-50 balance of what it takes to keep the happiness between the two couples, or between the couple. So what happens is it starts to cause bickering and fighting, and eventually they only start to see the flaws in each other. And once you start to see the flaws in each other, you've become a drifter. You're also a drifter because you drifted quickly into the relationship, and you're getting lost on the journey and not only losing yourself, but also a sense of everything around you. The sense of drifting may even cause some people to cheat on their partners. Occupation is another thing that causes us to become a drifter. We graduate from high school and a lot of us don't know what we want to do. So we jump into the first opportunity to get a job so that we can start making money, so that we can start making a living, because this is the subconscious pattern that's been pre-programmed into our subconscious mind. It's actually a trap of poverty, which claims far too many of us. Savings is another thing that can turn a person into a drifter because they tend to overspend, or maybe they just don't make enough money to save anything to begin with. This is another trap of poverty. And I highly suggest that if you guys have problems around money and money mindsets, to do an energy clearing on it. It's going to help. Environments are another way that we are caused to become drifters because we are simply surrounded by things that do not serve our highest good. And when we're surrounded by things that don't serve our highest good, we drift into unhappiness, which is another trap all in itself. Dominating thoughts are another way we choose fall into drifting. One of my favorite sayings, thoughts create reality. So if we're in a habit of negative thoughts, the more negative is what we're going to attract. But if we can break ourselves of those negative thoughts and start to replace them with positive ones, we pull ourselves out of this habit of drifting and back into independent thought. As human beings, we are the only beings, if that's what you want to call it, that are able to defy the law of the universe. And therefore, we are the only beings who can become drifters. All other animals on this planet move in definite response to how the world operates. For example, every year the bears migrate, and every year the bears hibernate and the birds migrate. Sorry, guys. So when we're asked about how drifting affects us as a nation, we find out that the Declaration of Independence allegedly ruined, the devil's plans to have our country being ruled by a dictator. Knowing all the things that I learned in the past year, this is something that reading for the 4th time really made me go, wow. So I highly encourage you all to read this part of the interview found on page 87. The devil talks about his current agenda with the president at this time, who happened to be Franklin D. Roosevelt. Give me your feedback on that. If you've stayed with me for this long, you might have been able to conclude that another word to describe drifting could be procrastination. The act of drifting, or procrastination, if you prefer to call it, is the number one common cause for failure. The inability to stay focused and go after what we really want hurts us more than we realize. We briefly get to touch base on money in chapter 4, where we are told that poverty is a contagious disease and it will only be found amongst the people who are drifters. The devil goes on to tell us that these people who possess the money in the world are the people who he doesn't have control over. Those people, the richest people in the world, are the people who use their minds regularly and go after what they want. Before we get ready to wrap things up, we learn that one thing to do to get off this gravy train of becoming a gravy train of being a drifter is to become a giver. And the devil tells us that if we wish to receive from the universe, we first must give. And he goes on to say that we have to give first if we wish to receive. So if we can find a way to be useful and help others, we're going to break this drifting habit cycle. And again, we're going to become independent in our own minds. So we end with Hill telling the devil that there's going to be so many people who are in disbelief over the authenticity and the interview of this book. And the devil reassures Hill that he has nothing to worry about because the people, the non-drifters, will totally understand this book. And he also says that the drifters will understand this book if they are ready to become a non-drifter. So I know that over the last 5 years, I have put this information in this book to good practical use every single day. I've learned so many methods to cancel, clear, delete the negative thoughts, to rewire it into positive thinking, to be more in gratitude and less in lack. It's been a fun journey. And in chapter 5, the interview continues, and we're going to learn more clever tricks that the devil claims to use against us. That is it for chapter 4. I am sending you all lots of love, lots of light, and many, many blessings. Namaste, friends.